Welcome to this analysis of the mining portion of Inside StarCitizen, This Life of Mine. I want to remind you all to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about specific parts that are new that are coming into 3.19 and what maybe you can plan your fleet around those things and some of the items you can pick up. In this part of the video, it's just a summary, so I'm letting it run through. And the music that you'll hear in the background is from the video, not from me. It's a little loud for my taste. I tried to isolate it out, but the way recordings are done, when I'm capturing, when it's not me, I don't have multiple tracks to work with. So I thought it would be a little smarter to just leave it clean and exactly the way it was presented to me. And without further ado, this is the start of the content of 3.19.
What we didn't have in mind is that we also have to facilitate expert miners that still need a challenge there. So what we tackled is a general balancing pass. That is, we adjusted all the items, all mineable heads, all mining heads, all sub-items that you attach to the mining head, the mining gadgets. Everything now has different values. We cleaned it up drastically, so it is now clearer what are the positives of what mining head, what are the positives of a sub-item, what are the positives of a mining gadget, and what are the negatives that come with it. And this is more important now because we also touched the minables themselves. So all the minables that you find now have different values in terms of their resistance, in terms of their instability. So what we try to do is match certain mining heads with certain materials or resources that you find. So you will have mining heads that go better with, for example, aluminum, and others that might go better with iron. And this directly leads to the next thing. So we introduced finally iron. And iron is a ship-exclusive mineable for now. We also introduced some new resources like genelite. Genelite is exclusively found in caves, and it's only mineable with FPS. And the reason why we wanted to introduce that is that, like, from the data that we gather from all of you playing, is no one uses FPS mining as a game mechanic outside of the prison.
I appreciate the honesty that Lehman has here as the lead systems designer, and to be able to bring that back, I believe, to his team and start from scratch with FPS mining. And I started with FPS mining in this analysis because I believe that if you can nail down FPS mining, the rest of the systems will follow as they get more complex and larger. FPS mining has endlessly been a source of not necessarily contentment, but players that are just trying to look for something new, players that are just starting out with starter ships, players that might even have larger ships, but they don't have the capability to mine and they want to try that gameplay loop. And if they have a negative experience, or even worse, they don't even break even on their fuel costs to fly out there or drive out there and come all the way back, the time sink, the cash, if it's a ship you're flying around that's not a 100i series, it can literally bankrupt you basically at the start of your experience in the game, and that's no fun for anyone. By having these rarer ores that can be located within the mines, these crystals, I believe that that's a good step forward and that they're exclusive to FPS mining within reason, that they're not going to make a lot more than, say, mining with a ship. I think, though, that will help balance out the systems. And also it could create a good gameplay experience for you, your friends, your orc mates to get together and head over to a cave and go explore it and try to find it. Maybe see who can get the most of the resource and make out the biggest on the process. Make it a competitive game that's a lot of fun. And, of course, bring a few med tools with you as well as your multi-tools. And later on with the tier 2 mining capacity for FPS mountable gear, I think that's going to be a nice touch. We already have dedicated medical tools. We will have multi-tools with the mining tool, and then eventually have the mining tier 2 item. So I see that as your next progression. You start with the multi-tool with the mining ore bit extractor, attachment, and then you work your way to the tier 2 FPS tool that will allow you to mine even faster, more effectively, and maybe even some modifications I'd like to see for that. And then you earn enough to be able to buy your ROC mining truck and be able to drive around in that thing and get to the sites. Work with your friends, work with your workmates if you don't already have a ship, and then get yourself a ship to take that ROC. And then finally, of course, the prospector. And down the road, a mole. Now, I say down the road, even though the mole's in the game, because it's a massive, massive kind of jump between getting from the prospector to the mole, not just in the cost to purchase the ship, but also you're going to find that your fuel costs go up, that also trying to organize multiple people to run all the turrets to make the mining turrets to really make it worth your time to break it out is probably going to take some time to organize. And also by that point, the good news is that by that point, you should have a good firm grasp on which mining procedures to do for refining and how that's all going to flesh out. Still, I'm very interested to see that they're fixing the FPS side. On the ship side, I like that there's a new resource that's ship only, the iron, which once again helps with that reinforcement of progression. Once you get past the FPS mining and past the ROC mining, and now you're in a prospector, you suddenly have this new resource to work with that is only achievable in a ship. And we're going to see in the later part of this video, in this interview that we're having, that it is spelled out that these items and resources are going to be spaced out throughout the verse. And there will be very, very good reasons to be able to go hunt them down and really find everything to build what you're looking to build.
We additionally cleaned up the way that resources are distributed throughout Stanton. And this is because we want to make resource gathering future-proof. With the introduction of crafting that will come further down the road, with this first implementation with the hull scraping gameplay, so you already got a glimpse of it. But what is important there is that we get a better control of where to find certain materials. And also, from our perspective, it's more interesting for players to know where they have to go to find certain material types. So what we did is we defined standard materials and quality or like rarity-based materials. Standard materials are something like copper, like iron, like something that you know from real life is used in basically every item that you find around. And those have distinct locations now within Stanton. For example, aluminum you can only find around Crusader, where copper you can only find around Microtech, which, so as a disclaimer, this can change during our development, but just to give you an idea that we now have distinct location where you can find these defined standard materials. That doesn't mean that you cannot find the standard materials elsewhere. There are chances of you finding them elsewhere, especially asteroid belts get more attractive because they have a more diverse spectrum of materials. But on the planet side, like you know from Earth, we just have very distinct locations where you can find those rare earths. And what we also introduced is that each of the standard material always have certain more rare or rarer materials associated with them. So this gives you a glimpse of where we are going, where our intention is to have star systems with exclusive materials that you need for your crafting. So you have to travel to a certain star system to get the material that you need for whatever item you would like to create.
Apologies to Bastian, but I'm going to let this just run through. It's just showing some new scanner AI and about how they're handling the UI interface in general for mining. I'm just going to let it run while I talk about one of the major changes that just kind of snuck into this video. In 3.19, they are going to start laying the groundwork for system exclusive resources. Resources that you can only mine in certain star systems, not even just some planetary locations, not even just planetary systems, like Stanton, for example, and her moons, or like they explained Microtech and her area that is orbiting around her, or this, let's say the asteroid belt in the edges of Stanton, we are talking about you will have to traverse to other star systems or organize in such a way where if you're looking to build something and not just buy it, if you're looking to build, the resources will be in other star systems. Maybe Thursday night you all mine in this location. Friday you convoy over to another location to begin mining in another star system to get another exclusive material. Another option that I think will perk up here is inter-org work in the future, where let's say you're strong in this system and we're all indies in another star system. We can trade resources 1 for 1, or more likely 90 for 100, based on the cost difference and values of these things, where we can trade wholesale large amounts of these materials. And I actually see a great value there for hull CDEs for that type of work. And it greatly excites me, both for the idea of convoys that are traversing space to be able to mine these resources and then also trade. And one of the first times I'm hearing a very good reason to conduct trade that is player-driven economy and not so much the NPCs. Now, remember, when we're talking quanta and the quantum system in general, we do have to think the NPCs obviously will be 90% of all the commercial draw, and they will want to build their own stuff. There's plenty of economy videos. I'll put them at the end credits of this video if you missed all that and Tony Z's team. However, this is very exciting stuff. I am a big fan of at least players having a portion of the economy driven by their decisions, and organizations also getting to have their decisions made for their best interest.
For multiplayer mining was sufficient, but especially with the mining gadgets, you could bring down the resistance so much that like multi-crew mining wasn't as needed anymore as we actually intended. And that's the benefit of having a game in a live environment, where you, as the community, create videos, create reviews, post like comments on the spectrum, that you are basically not as satisfied with the gameplay as you would like to be. And this is now our opportunity, and we saw the need in it to make it even more future-proof for all the upcoming systems. So we wanted to encourage players using the mole in a cooperative environment. And what we think lore-wise was that what makes sense and was an easy win for us was that because you are sharing one system, one computer on your mole, you basically have a way to synchronize your mining lasers. And by that, you get the benefit while sitting in a mole to decrease the instability of the targeted rock drastically. So if you compare this with a prospector hitting the same rock with, like, if you have 3 prospectors hitting the same rock, you will get a punishment basically in terms of instability. So we wanted to make sure that it's still solvable. If you are an expert miner, you can counter the instability there. But it's more effort that you have to put into it compared to a mole, where with you have a high instability rock and you have 2 friends or 3 friends, you better pick your mole over the 3 prospectors, because you will have an easier mining experience.
And now we're starting to see once again that theme of progression and the value of going up the ranks, so to speak. What is the point of buying the more expensive ship in game or in hangar or whatever you end up doing? Or what is the point of organizing all your friends if there isn't a clear path to a progression that's multiples better than just doing it yourself in a prospector? And as explained here, we are seeing the beginnings of perhaps more moles being used. I'll be honest, I'm a little apprehensive to say this is like the year of the mole if you're into mining or something. But I will strongly say that the mole is not going away. And if you already have one, or if you enjoy purchasing one for the long persistence, like for example, when 3.18 drops, you can make it one of your org goals to pick up a mole or 2 and share, amongst the groups, and pick that up in game. or just have one in your hangar, whatever you end up doing. And I'm not saying you will regret it. But I just don't see it as something that's going to be, unless you're truly a hardcore indie and you have a few friends or workmates that are into such things in the same time zone. I don't see it as going to be something that's super popular. I do see some groups to making use of this mole. In the future, when we have to traverse different star systems and transporting the material back, and also Pyro, for example, a system that's extremely dangerous and extremely hard to get around, the mole has more storage space than the prospector. It also crunches up the material, so it can hold more in general before it needs to throw the cans out and get those resources over to either a refinery on site, like the Expanse, or which is really, they said, calibrated for about 1, maybe 2 prospectors last I heard. So it's a little outclassed by the mole's output, or I should say mole's mining capacity, production, in its refining capacity, or being able to get back to the station. And the station may not exactly always be friendly. I'm thinking of Ruin Station. Trying to get industrial ships out will require escort. So having a single big old industrial ship to be able to take out, and it's not too big where it's like when the future Orion comes out, that's capital class and it's just insanity. It's a huge target. The mole is not quite at that level. It is not that bad in maneuverability standpoint. And in theory, you could even have a few combat ships escort the mole out, go to a faraway location that's hard to scan down, and dare I say it, a few of the folks jump out of their combat vessels, get in the mole to mine, and if something is picked up on scan in the future when you can scan down different targets, people then EVA back to their military vessels. I know it's a little cringe and it's a really weird way to describe it, but that may actually become a meta for some folks. Many people don't want to be a dedicated mining laser extraordinaire, especially when they're not even flying the ship. And also for the pilot of the mole, unless you're jumping back and forth between the front turret on that's down the ladder and forth, it's less than ideal. Unless you guys take turns flying the ship, that's not too bad. But I still see it as that may be a selling feature of, hey, we have an outpost out here, or at least just some combat vessels. You fly around, have some fun, and we occasionally mine out there as well. And, when we have the lucrative stuff, when there's no targets, whether they NPC or players that are from other factions, we can turn around and get some mining done and make the money to be able to buy your next in-game thing, or pick up some new equipment for your combat ships and your good utility vessels that are not indie related. So yeah, I see this as a very good win. And let's go back in for the final part of this.
And there's one more thing that ties in with the difficulty or increase of difficulty that we intended with this update, and that basically brings us back to the resources and the update that we did for the resources. Something we didn't have before, but we will now introduce, is that each resource composition will have an effect on the weight or on the mass of the mineable. So that means there are certain materials that are heavier and therefore harder to crack. So you definitely need to bring friends to be able to crack the stone with the super dense materials in comparison to resources that are less dense and are more porous. So you will have an easier life or easier mining approach with them. This will not make single player mining worthless. It will make it more interesting for sure, because we also will update a little bit of the trading, so it is even more valuable, or you get more profit out of even the less rare materials, because of the redistribution of the resources. Suddenly there is a demand at the other side of the universe for aluminum, for example. So you might wonder when this update will be available to you. And I have some good news. So you might have seen the content that we put in this video already. So it is already in a playable state for us, but not only that. Right now we are on a good track to have it inside or have it part of the next major release after our 3.18 patch.
As a reminder, we're in the days ahead looking at 3.18 live being released. And I think my estimate is in the next 2 weeks, if I go by my original estimate I did a couple videos ago. And my arguments were the PTU being constantly updated, the open to all backers on the PTU, as these are traditional signs that they're getting extremely close, the teasing of a new ship, the which is the Scorpius Antares, which they show that QED jamming as part of that trade hint for 3.19, and the Mantis and the Antares will become very valuable for those reasons. I would lean a lot more towards the Antares if you can budget it, especially when it's available in game. That'd definitely be a excellent pickup for org support of small gang PvP and holding an area down, and also for good and bad reasons, hunting pirates or being a pirate, either way. And I would say that having these tools in place doesn't really mean much unless there's a very good reason for people to come out and play and trade of these extremely important, now independently spawning the resources, like even the most basic irons and coppers and such, which only spawn in certain planetary systems now. And sorry, when we get to 3.19 specifically, and then also thinking of the rarer materials that only spawn in certain star systems as we move further and further along in the development, I see these systems becoming extraordinarily valuable. Now, one of the things that was hit upon here in the interview was that they're changing the weight characteristics. Basically, they're trying to make ores that are, the materials as they're refined, and also, I think, as I understand it, the ores before they're refined, into something that's more easy to move when they're not as valuable. And then the more valuable basically take up more weight, more space. And I wanted to make an important distinction here. I didn't really catch. There is an argument to be made that certain ships have an SCU rating that is not quite the same as how much stuff you can fit in there. It really depends on how many, what the actual materials weigh. And I think that's going to become something that becomes more and more important to really decipher as we go on. In this screenshot I chose from the video, you can see this nice little ship that's stuffed to the gills with metals. And I pause for a moment and I think of the Mercury Star Runner, and I think about it and I go, could I see an MSR running a bunch of materials in its tiny little cargo bay? Yeah, I could. Now, if I think of a C2, much bigger ship, has a massive amount of space for storage of material or vehicles, and it can be packed to the gills with material. There's one problem. The C2 and the M2 are practically the same ship. However, one is armored and has a chin turret and has a few other characteristics, to be fair. just put your pitchforks down. The service is on the second floor, etc. But the actual cargo bays are relatively close. However, the SCU is less on the M2. And that is most likely due to the fact it's eventually going to have armor. Right now, that's represented as just a raw amount of extra hit points, but in the future, that will mean a massive difference in that some ships with smaller weapon systems will simply bounce off the hull or do minimal damage to an M2, but on a C2, they could do serious damage because that armor is not as good. And because they serve different roles. The M2 is meant to be a little closer to the front lines or have a surprise attack, taken on it where it can still shrug that off a bit while its escorts take care of the issue or itself try to return fire, where the C2 is purely meant for space lanes that are safe, meant for civilian use and humanitarian style missions that the Crusader company has claimed in the past it does. I've covered that in a couple different lore videos about where the soul of Crusader is. Is it in the bomber A2s and A1s, or is it in the executive and civilian cargo markets and humanitarian aspects of the company? It seems to be a split company, but that's a topic for a whole nother day. The point is that this ship is a great example of the Hercules being armored versus not armored, and it changes the SCU rating of the ship. I think we're going to see more ships like that. Another example is ships that don't have very good atmo characteristics. Maybe they don't have a lot of armor, like the C2, but they don't have as good atmospheric coverage and they don't have as many thrusters. So when they go into atmosphere, it will make a massive difference. And once again, that armor will play a difference if it's in a high gravity or atmo planetary level gravity, or there's some moons that will have higher gravities than others. That armor will want to pull you down, and your thrusters will have to work harder, maybe just consume more fuel. Maybe it'll be that simple. But I do see it as something to think about for the future. If you're planning your fleets now, if you're thinking about what your org mates and you are going to have built up, carefully think about armored ships. Do you really need them, and where do you need them? And maybe have less of them than civilian vessels, that if you are planning to spend a lot more time in Stanton than you are in Pyro, for example, or spending more time in Nyx and saying, okay, well, we can have a mix. We can have a mix of these two vessels. Have a fleet for rainy day and have a fleet for clear days, and that we are confident we have enough people to put on scene with combat vessels where we can run the stuff that has less issues with it and can pack more metals and can pack more resources. I think the Cat would take a lot of heat in this circumstance because the Caterpillar is not exactly the best mover in atmosphere based on its characteristics of being a gigantic box. I'm being a little unfair. It has pretty good engines on the back of it, but I really question its VTOL characteristics compared to some of the other vessels in the game. Whereas a Constellation, even the Taurus, which can hold a little bit more than the other Connies, I think of as excellent VTOL characteristics and maybe a winner transporting some of these, maybe the rarer materials. It can defend itself reasonably, except for it loses its bottom turret, thanks to the Taurus having that tractor beam. But you're going to need that tractor beam to get all these resources on and off the ship quickly. And that's another thing to think about. The bigger the ship, will there be more turnaround time? Will there be more fuel cost that make it more difficult to run these cheaper material? And I think that's one of the reasons that you can hear them say, look, we're changing the weights of these cheaper materials so you can run as many as you possibly can pack. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm curious to see how it actually turns out when they talk of tweaking cargo. My ears stand up because I really think, is this a good thing for the game? Is this something for the future? But I like that they're thinking, at least in the near future, about other systems and how they're going to be implemented into the game. And then specifically thinking of the verse, talking about the star systems, I like that they're planning ahead to look, when we have a couple star systems in the game in the near future, here is how this is going to look. Here is how interstellar trade is going to function. And we're actually going to give players incentives and reasons to want to move between the systems for good reasons, not just for combat, not just for exploration. Don't get me wrong. They're both great whole sets of gameplay loops under both of those topics. We've covered them extensively. But one of the things that we haven't really seen a glimpse beyond the curtain for a while is actually one of the few functioning gameplay loops that has the most promise and has a lot of people backing it. And that is mining, and I will tie in production. I am actually more curious about production. As an owner of a Pioneer, I'm very excited about the idea of building outposts. And in the future, I want to be able to build my own ships and such, or at least the components and such, to be able to provide for my org mates and for my friends and start planning out ways to make money with them and sell them to the public, all the backers out there. And that really excites me. And to me, that interests me the most. Mining is going to be they have to nail down type topic to really get all that other stuff right. I like that they also mentioned salvaging with its little bit of construction material in this. That's been in for a while. When we talked about the Vulture, we talked about how you can produce different multi-tool parts directly in the ship, directly from the salvage. So yes, the evil twin of mining is still there and it's still prominent. I don't see salvage as going away. I don't see salvage as being a problem. I think the salvage having a reclaimer, even if it's only partially working the way they're intending, in game is a great sign that the salvage is going to be strong. And leading into 3.19, I think good mining and good salvage are going to be the core pillars to player production getting off the ground. Thank you for watching this video. This has been RedJay. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. And yeah, I'm very excited stuff. I'll be honest with you, I've been in 3.18 PTUs quite a bit lately. I have seen the developments with the elevators, and I can't speak for the trams. I actually didn't have too many problems with the mass transit other than them just not showing up in Orison on one server, and I server hopped and I got in another. And it happened to me, I think, another time as well, where I just had to server hop to be able to have the trams working and to the Skyway trams to work. I can't speak for the ones on the ground. I haven't seen any issues in Lureville. I haven't seen any issues in New Babbage. So I'll keep testing. I'll keep running around. I'll keep having a good time. If I see you in there, I always try my best to wave to folks, offer them to fly around with me. And yeah, I'm always welcome. Remember, if you have some comments, please put them below. If you're shy or if you just want to reach out personally, my Discord, as always, is RedJay #0001. And yes, I really do just answer everybody and chat with you. Have a good one and fly safe.